It's time for stories from STYX, which I have been asked about. It was always in the plan. I just needed to go through the epic animatics first, and let's lay some ground rules down. In terms of how I'm going to do this one, I'm doing lyrics first. I do believe there are animatics or there's art, visualizations for this. I still want to do lyrics only first. ADHD, let me not confuse myself. So I'm just going to listen. And I'm also going into this pretty blind. I've deliberately, again, very similar to Epic, kept myself very apart from it. What little I know is that this was created and written and all of that by Casper Fox, who I know from various stuff related to Epic, but also has probably my favorite reaction to the Phantom of the Opera musical, which is my favorite musical, by the way. Yes, I'm a basic bitch. It's fine. Let me love it. His reaction to that was like such a joy. I loved watching it. I know that there are some voices that are coming back from Epic, the musical. Like, I'll hear some voices that I've heard before. And from what I understand, it's an anthology musical. I believe there's a volume 1. I believe volume 2 is also out. What I'm assuming, given the title story from STYX, a lot of these are going to be pretty, chthonic based, so based in kind of the area of the underworld. Beyond that, the only thing I know is that apparently the Titanomachy is referenced in the first volume, so that's kind of cool. Other than that, I really know nothing, and I kind of like that. Ugh. Now I just got back from the gym, so my back's a little sore, so I'm gonna sit for this one. Hi, Peg. And you'll probably, and you'll get to see Peg in her ears and everything else, because she's gonna be like, why are we on the floor? So, again, I don't know how many songs I'm gonna tackle at once, given I initially, when I first ever looked at Epic, went, I'll do the whole saga, and then I rambled for 40 minutes on one song? Yeah, we're probably gonna go one song at a time. But I'm very excited for this. Now, very much like Epic, I'm probably going to keep pausing in the middle of things, mainly to try and reference and just be like, oh, here's what we're talking about, here's where this comes from, and extrapolate and everything else. I mean, again, I know so little about this that I have no expectations and I don't know what to expect, and this ought to be fun. So, official playlist. Do these have visuals? I really do just want lyrics. No offense, I'm sure the art is great. Like, this truly is nothing against the artist. I just really need lyrics only going into this first. So actually, let me pull up some lyrics, because then I can also see the track list, which would be great. So we have 6 tracks. Okay. We have Titanomachy. Okay, so we're kicking it off with the Titanomachy. Shades, In the Underworld Now, Crossroads, My Persephone, and There Is No Name. I am assuming we're probably going to look a lot then at Hades in this one. I mean, just by the theming, I would guess. I mean, we're obviously going to be in the underworld. I mean, just saying stories from STYX gives me that idea. Anyway, STYX being one of the rivers of the underworld. Starting with the Titanomachy, that is so cool. And yes, Titanomachy, same thing.
Out of all the Greek gods, Hades may carry the burden of every soul to ever pass through the underworld, but also the burden of misconception. Ironic, a god of this caliber thriving underneath our feet.
Okay, so this is a muse who's speaking, whether it be the muse of history, maybe the muse of epic poetry, if we're going for that vibe. I guess probably would be the muse of history. I love the idea that Hades is the victim of the greatest misconception. I once, way back, like right when I was out of uni, just like wrote some sort of blog post where I was ranting about, like, it just frustrates me so much that and I find it lazy writing. So many people always just write Hades as the villain because they're like, oh, death, all of it. I'm like, first off, he's not the god of death. Thanatos is that. He's just the god of the underworld. He's the ruler of the underworld. That's his kingdom. He's not a cause of death. Like, none of that. He has this strange bad rap in popular, like, film and television and everything else that just frustrates the hell out of me. Where I'm like, he literally is just sort of like, I don't want to be involved, but he is one of the most loyal of the Olympians to his brother Zeus. If Zeus calls for anything, Hades is like, it's just like, you want to bury a body? Whose car we taking? Like, that's Hades. He's the one who shows up when you need him, right? Kind of no questions asked. And generally just keeps to himself. And yes, he is thriving underneath everyone's feet. The underworld, I mean, he is said to be the wealthiest of all the gods. I mean, think you're under the ground, you get all the precious stones and the metals and everything else glittering and everything, despite the fact it's a place where the sun don't shine. But I love this interesting how we're starting with a muse speaking. It reminds me very much of epic poetry, this idea of invocation of the muses. That's how both the Iliad and the Odyssey start. In this case, we have the muse like, he ain't just invoking me, I'm here to actually tell you. I think it's cool. It also does give me a little bit of a scance. It reminds me of like Disney's Hercules, where they do the idea of the muses. Now, obviously, that one takes a very radical, like hard right, almost kind of quirky, weird, I mean, kid-friendly, just kind of goofy turn. And I mean, and then they're amazing gospel singers, which is so cool. But again, starting with a muse. I like that.
Hades sees life for the first time when his father Cronus spits up the king of the underworld, along with Poseidon, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia. Led by Zeus, a revolution begins.
Clarity.
I know, I'm interrupting Hades. Yes! This is what leads to the Titanomachy. The interesting thing about this, actually, is where Zeus sits as a fascinating character in terms of gender roles, especially of the gods leading up to this. So, which, look, I know that there's often, and I'll say this, I'm gonna blanket statement this, and I normally don't like making generalizations, but it's something I've noticed, especially in non-academic circles in discussions about the Greek gods. There's a very like black or white binary thinking about Zeus. Like you either think, no, he's a fine guy, or he's just like a fuckboy tyrant. There's no in between for people, which I think is a big mistake, especially if you're looking at the Homeric epics and you're like the Archaic Age. I mean, and Homer and Hesiod, from whom we get the story of the Titanomachy. I mean, they're writing in big shades of gray. The whole thing is shades of gray and these like nuanced corners and areas. So like to try and make it all like, well, you're good or bad. No, not really. Not at all. You're really missing the point of Greek mythology. Zeus sits in this really interesting space in terms of like the gender roles of the gods. And because up to that point, it's very much the male gods smash first, maybe ask questions later. Generally, they don't ask questions at all. And it's the women who do the questioning and do the scheming and the planning and like do all this stuff, because it's Gaia getting Cronus to overthrow his father Uranos. So she comes up with the idea, she does the planning, she does anything she needs to be to make sure like this will be fine, and goes to Cronus and says, want to kill your dad? And hands him like the scythe, and Cronus just goes, okay, and just goes. Now, when Zeus is realizing something's fucked up, we need to fix this, and instead of going immediately smashy smashy, maybe we should do a bit of talky first. Right? So he actually subsumes a bit of the female gender role by saying, I'm actually going to be diplomatic. I'm going to gather allies, because part of it is also we're talking a grander scale. Yeah, he's going to take down Cronus, but there's all the other titans, and they may not be super huge on this idea of the Olympians joining. Ultimately, that's what will lead to the Titanomachy. It's not just defeating Cronus, it's defeating all the other titans who might stand against them. But Zeus does the work, he does all the talking, all the planning, and the diplomatic work to gather allies of other titans, other older beings, and their children, so nymphs and everything else. Obviously, he works with Metis to get the plan of getting Cronus to spit up his other siblings, who again have been just chilling in his stomach this whole time.
Awkward.
And builds a whole alliance before we then have this revolution, this then big battle. And mind you, the Titanomachy is an incredibly violent moment. It's, I mean, completely scars the earth, if you will, in the mythology. So I love that. And I just think it's cool to think about how Zeus is like the first one of the male gods who goes, hey, maybe let's do diplomacy before I just rush in smashing shit. I'm not just gonna Hulk smash my way through this. I'm gonna have a plan. And he's the one who comes up with the plan, which is super huge. And then, of course, later, if you talk gender roles, the idea of, like, the female gods being the ones who give birth, like, even Zeus takes on part of that role, birthing Athena from his head and Dionysus from his thigh. Like, he's a fascinating character in that regard. So let's get in here for clarity. Hades.
Clarity, infirmary, it's like I'm born again.
Very much a second birth, yeah?
Brother reaches out a lifelong friend.
Yeah, Hades and Zeus always had a good relationship.
We must stand united while we suffer, take for granted.
The titans are the sorrow we must reap.
I love that line. The titans are the sorrow we must reap. One, reaping, the reaper, the scythe. That is the image, the weapon, if you will, associated with Kronos. He is, after all, a harvest god. This is where I have to note Kronos, often spelled like Kronos, is not Kronos, the god of time. They are not the same god, so please don't make that mistake. Kronos, the father of the Olympians, is in fact a harvest god. And then that they are the sorrow we must reap. Now, they fight a lot of the Titans, but not all of them. Remember, some of the Titans actually side with the Olympians, whether it be Metis, Prometheus and Epimetheus, who have like the absolute biggest case of significant naming. Prometheus coming from pro, and Metis meaning like forethought, and then Epimetheus, hind thought, literally foresight and hindsight rolling up here, and several other Titans join with them. So we're in for a long, brutal battle.
Destiny still ours to claim. Don't live in the past, don't be the same. Put our first remark, it's time to leap.
Before we witness moonlight, we are thrown into.
I love a good ostinato. I love that kind of ostinato in the back. And love that we're hearing from all the different kind of Olympians. We're hearing Zeus, that deep, deep rumbling bass. It's beautiful. Interesting that Hades is a slightly higher voice. Maybe I'm just so used to always hearing Hades as a deeper singing voice. I mean, a lot of people might think Hadestown. I think also of other operas. And so it's just like he's normally always a much deeper singing voice. It's kind of wild to hear him in almost a tenor.
I'm sorry that your birth is bathed in blood, but I will drown these brutes with a flood.
Drown these brutes with a flood. Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, one, Casper, you must have read your Hesiod. You had to have read your Hesiod. It's the greatest account for the story of the Titanomachy. It's the earliest account for the story of the Titanomachy, and that comes from his work, the Theogony. My one fair warning, if anybody goes, I want to go read the Theogony, if you've read Homer, and you think that Hesiod is going to be the same, he ain't. Because Homer is a dramatist. He's giving you the flashbang whiz of like, I am trying to entertain you. I am still going to make this very compelling, while it is also like high art, basically. Hesiod, he is not Gypsy Rose Lee and her mama. He is not here to entertain you. He can be very, very dry. He's great for study. He's great for the information. He's not necessarily the most entertaining thing to read, even while the information is great. But he's the earliest written account we have for the Titanomachy, and his work, the Theogony, which is essentially on the origin of the gods. I mean, he begins all the way back in the cosmogony, which is like the origin of the cosmos, like everything coming out of chaos. Like, how did the Greeks, or at least how did most of the Greeks, in terms of what relative universality you can have in a non-Unitarian religion, believe the world came to be. And part of that is obviously leading up to how did then the Olympians come to power. But I love this. At first I was going to say, I'm sorry that your birth is bathed in blood. I mean, one, birth itself is a very bloody process, but now you're having a whole second birth, which itself was probably pretty unpleasant, and then we're about to go fight a massive war. And again, the Titanomachy is a massive conflict that scars the earth in ways that it had never really been scarred before, because even the defeat prior of Uranos by Cronus, it had not really been that bloody a conflict, because it was just Uranos versus Cronus. And like, yeah, the other Titans are there, but really it's Cronus who does it. In this case, we're talking groups fighting groups. It's part of why, and I'm sure anybody who only is familiar with Epic will find this kind of wild, in the Odyssey, we're told the famous story of Hephaestus doing the net trap on Aphrodite and Ares when he catches them in his and Aphrodite's marriage bed, which is like the big no-no of that situation. It is Poseidon who rolls up and basically calms everyone down. He plays the peacemaker, and he tells Hephaestus, like, look, let's find a way to let this go. Here's what you're going to do. We're going to make Ares really pay you back because of the affront that's been done to you. Just let them go. Let's not start a war. And a lot of people who just think, oh, well, Poseidon is only about, just like, warfare and like, fuck everybody, whatever. No, because he fought in the Titanomachy. He knows when gods fight gods for serious reasons, and it's not because of like a human squabble, like, kind of like the Trojan War, where yes, there was damage, but they were not really fighting on the scale that they could. If the gods are really going to fight gods over divine beef and there's no humans involved here, it gets ugly and it gets damaging. So they're like, let's not do that again.
Reclaim the Cyclops, grants us strength, we must
reclaim the Cyclops. Yes, this was part of why Gaia was actually super pissed at her son Kronos, because part of the deal she'd had when saying, hey, go overthrow your father Uranos, was you had the original 3 Cyclopes, whose names are lightning, translate as lightning, thunder, and lightning bolt, Thunderbolt. It's something like that. Again, they have kind of hilarious names. And I've said this before, but in my head I always go lightning, thunder, thunderbolt, and I know that's not totally correct. And they are the forgers of the weapons of the gods, but also as well as the 100-handers, who have a name in Greek, and I will absolutely royally fuck it up, so I ain't gonna do it, I'll just put it down below. These were children of Gaia and Ouranos, who Ouranos threw into Tartarus because he thought they were ugly. He thought they were monstrous, like they didn't, so why don't they look like the Titans? He just threw them in Tartarus, and Gaia got pissed over that, kind of understandably. And so she got Cronus to overthrow Ouranos with the understanding that you will then also let your siblings out of Tartarus. And Cronus just went, yeah, but I also think they're ugly and I'm gonna leave them there. He never did. So Gaia got really pissed. And this was something that essentially Zeus, again, doing the diplomacy, said, I'll absolutely do. And he actually followed through on that promise. He released them from Tartarus because he said that's bullshit. The ones who get thrown into Tartarus are essentially the Titans who revolt, are the ones who get thrown into Tartarus, which is like, yo, you're a prisoner of war at that respect. Like, you fought, you lost. Or, you know, you might be Atlas and you gotta hold like the vault of the sky up. But yeah, part of this was releasing the Cyclops and the 100-handers, who were very powerful allies. Ooh. This is so interesting. Sorry, I'm going to briefly talk about the music that I'm hearing here, because, you know, we start with piano, then we bring in strings, and now we're bringing in, there's a kind of electronic distortion that you hear almost in like I think dubstep or house music or something. I don't really know enough about music genres there to talk, but I'm going, oh, we're getting more electronic, and you're having this driving beat coming forward. It's very interesting. Yep. So please stand with me now and claim our father's final goodbye. Yep. Oh. Okay. Almost makes me think of a video game. Oh, this is club music. This is a rave. And it's doing what the strings were doing before. You know, you could say this is part of the revolution. If the old world is the more traditional instruments, we've moved into these electronic sounds, these simulated instruments. Again, I don't know, Casper, if you happen to see this for some reason, or if anybody knows, I don't know what the thought process is in terms of musical construction and why we're shifting from the kind of traditional instruments to these. I would think because if we're talking about a revolution starting, it starts getting more and more electronic. These are the Olympians coming through. Also talking about the father's final goodbye. Kronos, yes, I mean, ultimately, yeah, they win. They defeat Kronos. Now, we do not kill Kronos. Remember, we brother, sisters who never die. None of these gods die, even in defeating other gods. You don't kill them, you just defeat them. They're far more diminished in power. They cry uncle, like that's it. In the case of Kronos, it is either he is thrown in Tartarus, or sometimes he is then said to be basically ruling the Elysian fields in the underworld. So he has a little pocket, but he is nowhere near at the height of power that he was before. He's been knocked down so many pegs, he's essentially inconsequential. I love that ostinato. Ooh, thunderclap.
So blinded by the moon, we forget about the stars. Were we in a prison before he set the bar?
Interesting.
Who would rule over the skies, over the seas, over the land below? And who would be the one to tell us what to do and where to go?
Yeah, gonna be Zeus.
The divine birthright obligated them to split the cosmos amongst themselves.
Obligated. Interesting. It didn't necessarily obligate them. Zeus could have very readily taken control of everything, kind of in the way that Cronus did. But again, because he's assuming a bit of the female gender role and recognizing diplomacy is important, and also looking at the mistakes of the past and going, well, that was stupid. I don't want to risk another bullshit like that. Why don't we split this? Now, it's not like there weren't deities of the ocean or whatever prior to this. I mean, you have Okeanos, you have Pontus, you have all of these water deities and like, but breaking up the realms is a smart way to say, hey, we are all equally invested in this. Again, this is good diplomacy. So yes, the three sons of Cronus are basically divided out. Zeus is going to take the skies, the world above. Poseidon takes the seas, Hades takes the underworld. And again, they are all perfectly fine with these assignments. There is no beef. Don't have Disney's Hercules fool you. There's no beef over this. They're all perfectly fine. And they all really do have their own realms. They have a great deal of power. I find it also then interesting now we've retreated back to the piano. Are we assigning instruments to characters? Is the piano really going to be Hades' instrument? I don't know. I just find it very interesting the way the music is shifting from like traditional instruments to more electronic kind of sounds. And again, I love this muse coming in giving dialogue. It feels very like Grecian drama, if you will.
The three sons of Cronus would have their territory decided by the fates.
The burden of leadership.
It was pretty accepted he was gonna do it. Yeah, they're all accepting. Yeah, they do gladly accept. They're fine. It was pretty expected that Zeus was gonna take over. He was the one in charge. He led the revolt, and crazy enough, because he's the youngest, he was ironically one of the most powerful. In the same way that Cronus was one of the younger of the Titans, he was the most powerful. It's very strange. Very strange thing. There was kind of really no real issue at this point. You know, Zeus had done really all the work in terms of prepping and planning and getting this done, and while everybody fought in the Titanomachy, you recognize the guy who made it all happen, basically.
Accept it. The might of the underworld, I will gladly accept it.
The times of the Titans are over, and a new era begins with the Olympians.
I hear ya. I love the harmonies. They're a little buried. Woo! Okay. Very nice. I loved all of the I accepts that are going on there. The one downside, and this could be my headphones again, I don't know anything about the mixing, they were a little buried under the mix. They felt a little quiet under the mix. This could be my headphones. I'm fully willing to accept that. It just felt like I wish they were a little more forward, because there's beautiful harmonies happening in there between all these voices, and layering that many voices is extremely hard. So like, hats off. Also, in terms of a quick way of doing the Titanomachy, somebody read their Hesiod. I can only assume somebody read their Hesiod. Very well done. I'm going to imagine that during the kind of musical break, that's the fighting happening. And again, this was a brutal conflict. You can't like emphasize how brutal it was. I had talked before in talking about Epic how they had believed the or maybe it was in the Odyssey book club. I really can't remember where I say things by now. That the idea of the explosion of Mount Terra, which was this massive volcano on Santorini, which at the time was just called Terra, was the inspiration for a lot of the idea of what happened to the Phaeacians as this society that just sort of like went kaboom. What happened? Did the mountain blow up on them? Well, also in some scholarship, we wonder if that was where the idea of the Titanomachy came from, especially in the way that Hesiod describes it in the Theogony. Now, they really wouldn't have had a written memory of the explosion of Terra, which the explosion of Mount Terra, if you want to know how devastating it was, here's what Santorini looks like. Do you see that big section that looks like a big old bay carved up by water? That used to be land. That was Mount Terra. It just took a chunk out of that island to cause massive tsunamis and everything else. It was devastating. And a lot of the descriptions that Hesiod uses seem to be coming from some sort of oral tradition of people passing down, talking about what it had been like when that explosion happened, and explaining like what in the fuck was that. Because obviously anybody who would have been really close to the blast was probably dead. If it is that violent. But obviously they had no written accounts. They had just come out of the Dark Ages, which was these centuries of just seemingly total illiteracy. And it's where also then the language changes. You come out of Linear A and Linear B, and you get some of the earliest forms of ancient Greek letters and lettering and writing. So again, they had come out of this whole era of seeming ignorance. And so there was a lot that had been left forgotten. But the descriptions, again, of the Titanomachy, especially in the Theogony, seem to, like, echo, like, maybe memories of the explosion of Mount Terra or something like that being passed down. And, again, these great natural disasters they could suffer, whether they be earthquakes and floods and everything else. So that makes me happy. Very nerdy. It's kind of wild to go through this knowing that it is an anthology, because it means I can kind of just look at each song and enjoy them. But also I'll be curious as to like how much of a through line are we keeping per like volume, knowing the volumes are not necessarily going to relate to each other. But that is fascinating. Again, another thing I'll note is the fact that Hades' voice is so much higher than I'm used to hearing. I'm so not used to a tenor Hades. I'm way more conditioned for like a baritone bass, and I'm just like, my mind is so thrown. But I guess if you really want to give Zeus the deep kind of bass voice, contrasting with something like a tenor is nice. And again, also everybody who came together when singing at the end, these harmonies are very beautiful. Very beautiful. Oh, this is fun. This is light and I say light and delightful, and here I am talking about the Titanomachy. But that was so much fun. Ooh, I kind of can't wait to hear more. Interesting soundscape as well, because it doesn't sound like a traditional musical. Like, we're not talking traditional instruments. Again, that whole bit in the middle that just sounds like we're raving at the club. You'd never think to hear that. And ooh, this is fun. This is so much fun.